The dust swirled lazily across the main street of Redemption Creek, a town so small it barely warranted a dot on any map worth its salt. It was the kind of place where tumbleweeds outnumbered residents 2-1, and where the harsh Wyoming sun had bleached everything, wood, cloth, and dreams alike, to the same washed-out shade of gray-brown. The year was 1882, and the West was still wild enough to break a man or make him, depending on how the cards fell. Samuel Sam Mackenzie stood on the porch of the general store, his weathered hands wrapped around a cup of bitter coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. At 34, he had the look of a man who'd been carved from the same unforgiving rock as the surrounding Badlands. His ranch, the Double Bar M, sprawled across 2,000 acres of scrub brush and stubborn grass. 5 miles north of town, it was good land, as far as Wyoming land went, which meant it would keep a man alive if he worked it hard enough and prayed for rain. Sam had built the ranch with his own 2 hands, starting with nothing but a deed, a handful of cattle, and enough determination to shame a mule. For 8 years, he'd risen before dawn and worked past sunset, turning raw wilderness into something resembling a home. The house wasn't much to look at, 4 rooms of rough-hewn timber with a tin roof that sang in the wind, but it was solid and true, like Sam himself. The problem was, it was empty. "You gonna stand there all day nursing that cold coffee? Mackenzie?" Old Pete Hawkins called from his rocking chair outside the saloon. "Or are you gonna do something about that hangdog look you've been wearing for months?" Sam didn't answer, but his jaw tightened. The truth was, the silence of his ranch had begun to weigh on him like a physical thing. He'd catch himself talking to the horses just to hear a voice, even if it was his own. Sundays were the worst, when other ranchers would ride into town with their families for church, children scrambling down from wagons, wives straightening bonnets and smoothing skirts. Sam would sit in his usual pew, third from the back on the left, and try not to notice the empty space beside him. It was Mrs. Adelaide Murphy, the pastor's wife and Redemption Creek's unofficial matchmaker, who first mentioned the advertisements. "There's agencies back east," she'd said one Sunday after service, cornering him with the determination of a sheepdog. "Respectable ones. They help connect good Christian women with men out west who need wives. Nothing shameful about it, Samuel. The Lord works in mysterious ways." Sam had dismissed the idea at first. Mail-order bride. The very phrase sat uneasily in his mind, like buying a wife from a catalog, alongside harness leather and seed corn. But as autumn turned to winter and the nights grew longer, he found himself thinking about it more and more. The letter he finally wrote was simple and honest, penned by lamplight on a December evening while snow piled against the windows. "My name is Samuel Mackenzie. I own a cattle ranch in Wyoming territory. I am looking for a wife who isn't afraid of hard work and simple living. I can offer a good home, respect, and partnership in building something lasting. I am not a man of fancy words, but I keep my promises." He'd sent it to the Matrimonial Times in Philadelphia, along with a photograph taken 2 years prior, the only one he had. In it, he stood stiff and formal in his Sunday best, looking like a man facing a firing squad rather than a camera. The first response came in February, the envelope bearing elegant handwriting that made his calloused fingers seem even clumsier as he opened it. "Dear Mr. Mackenzie, your letter spoke to me with its plainness and sincerity. My name is Catherine Morrison. I am 26 years old and recently widowed. I seek not luxury but purpose, not ease but meaning. The frontier calls to those who wish to build rather than inherit, and I find myself among their number. If you would consider correspondence with one who has known both joy and sorrow, I would welcome your letters. Respectfully, Mrs. Catherine Morrison." Something in her words, the lack of flowery promises, the straightforward admission of her widowhood, struck a chord in Sam. He wrote back that very evening, and thus began a correspondence that spanned 4 months and dozens of letters. Catherine wrote of her life in Philadelphia, where she worked as a seamstress to support herself after her husband's death from consumption. She didn't dwell on her loss, but Sam could read between the lines. The careful way she mentioned having no children, the determination that threaded through her descriptions of her work. She asked practical questions about the ranch, the climate, the nearest school. There wasn't one. And whether he kept chickens. He didn't, but would get some if she wanted. Sam found himself looking forward to her letters with an anticipation that surprised him. He wrote about the ranch, the rhythm of the seasons, the satisfaction of watching a calf grow strong. He tried to be honest about the hardships, the isolation, the back-breaking work, the uncertainty of weather and markets. But he also wrote about the beauty of sunrise over the mountains, the way the stars looked close enough to touch on clear nights, the pride of building something with one's own hands. By May, they had agreed. She would come west. Sam would pay her passage and meet her at the train station in Cheyenne. If, after meeting, either had doubts, she would be free to return east with money for her passage home. It was businesslike and practical, which seemed fitting for both of them. The morning Catherine was due to arrive, Sam rose even earlier than usual. He shaved with extra care, cutting himself twice in his nervousness. His best shirt, saved for Sundays and funerals, felt strange against skin more accustomed to rough cotton and flannel. The ride to Cheyenne, 2 days with an overnight stop, passed in a blur of anxiety and second thoughts. He reached the station 3 hours early and spent the time pacing the platform like a caged wolf. What if her letters had lied? What if his had? What if she took one look at him and got back on the train? He'd faced down wolves, droughts, and claim jumpers, but nothing had ever made his hands shake like waiting for that train whistle. When it finally came, black smoke billowing against the summer sky, Sam thought his heart might pound clean out of his chest. Passengers began to disembark, traveling salesmen, families heading further west, ladies in fancy Eastern clothes who looked at the dusty town with barely concealed dismay. And then he saw her. Catherine Morrison was neither beautiful nor plain, but something in between that he hadn't known existed. She had auburn hair pulled back in a practical style, a gray traveling dress that had seen better days, and eyes the color of sage honey. But it was the way she stood, straight-backed despite obvious exhaustion. Chin lifted as she scanned the crowd. That caught him. Here was a woman who had been bent but not broken. Their eyes met across the platform. Sam removed his hat and took a step forward, then another. She moved toward him with the same careful deliberation, pulling a single carpet bag that appeared to contain all her worldly possessions. "Mr. Mackenzie?" Her voice was softer than he'd imagined, but steady. Mrs. Morrison." He cursed himself for stumbling over her name. That is, yes, Sam Mackenzie." A small smile touched her lips. "You look just like your photograph, only less terrified." Despite his nerves, Sam found himself smiling back. That photographer had a way of making a man feel like he was about to be shot. "I know the feeling." She gestured to her carpet bag. "This is all I have. I hope that's not a disappointment." "No, ma'am. Traveling light show sense." He reached for her bag, their fingers brushing as she released it. "Are you? Would you like something to eat or rest? The hotel here is clean, and we don't have to—" "Mr. Mackenzie," she interrupted gently. "I've come 2,000 miles to start a new life. I see no reason to delay it." They were married 3 days later in Redemption Creek's small church, with Mrs. Murphy beaming in the front row and Pete Hawkins serving as witness despite his declared skepticism about the whole enterprise. Catherine wore a simple blue dress she'd made herself, and Sam managed to get through his vows without stumbling, though his voice came out rougher than intended when he promised to honor and protect her. The reception was held in the church hall. Nothing fancy, just cake and coffee and the curious eyes of the town upon them. Sam noticed how Catherine held herself, polite but reserved, offering just enough information to satisfy curiosity without truly revealing anything. When asked about Philadelphia, she spoke briefly of the city's crowds and noise. When questioned about her late husband, she said only that he had been a good man taken too soon. As evening fell and they prepared to leave for the ranch, Sam heard the whisper starting, "Mail order bride, Can you imagine? Must be something wrong with her, coming all this way. Or with him, needing to send away for a wife. But loudest of all, though meant to be overheard, the cowboy married the mail-order bride. Wonder how long before she runs back east? Sam's jaw clenched, but Catherine placed a light hand on his arm. Let them talk, she said quietly. Words are just wind. As they rode out of town in Sam's wagon, their few wedding gifts and Catherine's carpet bag secured in the back, Sam stole glances at his new wife. The setting sun painted her face in shades of gold and rose, and there was something in her expression, a mixture of determination and hope, that made him think maybe, just maybe, this strange arrangement might work. The double-bar M came into view as the last light faded from the sky, and Sam heard Catherine's quick intake of breath. It's beautiful, she said softly, and Sam knew she wasn't looking at the modest house or the weathered barn, but at the vast expanse of land rolling toward the mountains, at the endless sky scattered with the first stars. It's home, he said, then added more quietly, You're home now, too. She turned to look at him then, and in the gathering darkness, he couldn't quite read her expression, but her voice was firm when she answered, Yes, home. As Sam helped her down from the wagon and led her toward the house that would shelter their uncertain future, neither of them noticed the rider on the distant ridge, silhouetted against the dying light, watching their arrival before turning his horse east and disappearing into the darkness. The first morning of her new life. Catherine woke to the sound of Sam's boots on the floorboards and the distant lowing of cattle. For a moment, disorientation clouded her mind, the absence of city sounds. No clatter of carriages or hawkers' cries. Then memory returned. The simple bedroom with its handmade furniture, the wedding ring still foreign on her finger, the vast silence of the Wyoming plains. She dressed quickly in one of her 2 work dresses and found Sam in the kitchen, struggling with the coffee pot. His look of relief when he saw her might have been comical if it hadn't been so earnest. I'm not much of a cook, he admitted, gesturing at the smoking skillet where something that might once have been bacon was now charcoal. Then it's fortunate I am, Catherine said, gently taking the skillet from him. Why don't you show me where everything is? That became their pattern in those early days, Sam teaching her the rhythms of ranch life, Catherine bringing order to the domestic chaos he'd lived in for years. She learned to pump water from the well without flooding herself, to keep the wood stove at just the right temperature, to gauge the weather by the color of the sunrise. Sam, for his part, rediscovered the pleasure of a hot meal waiting at day's end, of clothes mended before holes became tears, of a house that smelled of baking bread instead of bachelor neglect. The work was harder than anything Catherine had known in Philadelphia. By the end of the first week, her hands were raw from lye soap and scrubbing. Her back ached from hauling water, and she'd ruined a pot of beans by letting them burn while she dozed off in the afternoon heat. But when Sam came in that evening, tired and dusty from moving cattle, he'd simply said, "Burned beans taste better than my cooking any day," and eaten 2 bowls without complaint. Slowly, tentatively, they began to know each other beyond their letters. Catherine learned that Sam hummed tunelessly while he worked, that he had a weakness for ginger snaps, that he'd named all the horses but pretended he hadn't. Sam discovered that Catherine talked to herself while she worked, that she had a gift for making something from nothing in the kitchen, that she sang hymns in a clear soprano while hanging laundry. The intimacies of married life came harder. They moved around each other carefully, excessively polite. Sam always knocked before entering their bedroom, though it was his own house. Catherine kept her eyes averted when he washed at the pump. They slept on opposite edges of the bed, a careful expanse of quilt between them, both pretending the arrangement was natural. It was the nights that revealed the cracks in their careful courtesy. Sam would wake to find Catherine sitting by the window, staring out at the darkness, her arms wrapped around herself as if holding something in. When he asked if she was well, she always returned to bed with a murmured apology, but he could feel her lying awake beside him, rigid as a board. 3 weeks into their marriage, Sam rode into town for supplies and took Catherine with him. It was her first return to Redemption Creek since their wedding, and he noticed how she steeled herself as they approached the general store. The whispers started the moment they entered. "That's her, Mrs." Eliza Hartwell murmured to her companion, not quite quietly enough. "The mail-order bride. From Philadelphia, they say. Probably couldn't find a husband there." Her friend, Mrs. Dorothy Banks, replied, "You know what they say about widows." Sam's fists clenched, but Catherine continued examining bolts of cloth as if she hadn't heard. Her face remained serene, but he saw how her fingers trembled slightly as she touched a length of blue calico. Mr. Jonas Garrett, who owned the store, at least had the decency to treat them normally, discussing the weather and the price of cattle as he filled their order. But when Catherine asked about employment, mentioning she was an experienced seamstress, his expression grew uncomfortable. "Well, now, Mrs. Mackenzie, I'm not sure the ladies hereabouts would. That is, Mrs. Hartwell usually handles any sewing needs for the town." "I understand," Catherine said quietly. "Perhaps another time." The ride home was silent until they were well out of town. Then Catherine said, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to embarrass you." Sam pulled the wagon to a halt so abruptly that Catherine had to catch herself on the seat. "Embarrass me?" He turned to face her fully. "Catherine, you've done nothing wrong. It's them that should be embarrassed, treating you like a mail-order bride." She smiled sadly. "But that's what I am. Samuel, we can't pretend otherwise." "You're my wife," he said firmly. "That's all that matters." Something shifted in her expression then, a softening around her eyes. "You're a good man, Samuel Mackenzie." That night, for the first time, when they lay in bed, Catherine didn't cling to her edge of the mattress. The space between them remained, but it felt less like a chasm. As summer deepened, Catherine adapted to ranch life with a determination that impressed Sam. She learned to milk the 2 dairy cows, to gather eggs from the hostile hens he'd acquired at her request, to tell the difference between the dust clouds of approaching riders and incoming weather. Her soft city hands grew calloused, her fair skin bronzed despite the bonnet she wore religiously. But it was the land itself that seemed to work the greatest change in her. Sam would find her standing outside in the evenings, watching the sun paint the mountains purple and gold, or sitting on the porch in the pre-dawn darkness, wrapped in a shawl, listening to the coyotes sing. One night, he found her crying silently as she watched falling stars streak across the vast Wyoming sky. "It's so big," she said when he asked what was wrong. "In the city, the buildings hold you in, make you feel safe. Here," she gestured at the endless expanse. "Here, there's nowhere to hide." "Is that bad?" Sam asked carefully. She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, "No. It's terrifying, but also," she searched for words, "clean. Like God scraped everything away and left just the bones of the world." They stood together in comfortable silence until the cold drove them inside. That night, when Catherine had one of her nightmares, crying out wordlessly, thrashing in the quilts, Sam did what he'd wanted to do for weeks. He gathered her against him, holding her until the trembling stopped. "I'm sorry," she whispered against his shoulder. "I didn't mean to wake you." "Hush," he said, stroking her hair awkwardly. "Nothing to be sorry for." She relaxed incrementally, her breath evening out. "Just before she fell back asleep," she murmured. "He wasn't a good man. My husband. I lied about that." Sam's arms tightened around her, but he said nothing. Some truths needed time to ripen before they could be spoken in daylight. The incident with the rattlesnake happened on a blazing August afternoon. Catherine was hanging wash when she heard the distinctive rattle. The snake, coiled in the shadow of the woodpile, was directly between her and the house. She froze, her heart hammering, the wet sheet in her hands suddenly weighing 100 pounds. Sam appeared around the corner of the barn, took in the situation at a glance, and moved with the fluid economy of a man who'd faced danger before. The shot from his revolver was sharp and final. The snake's body convulsed once, then lay still. "You hurt?" Sam asked, crossing to her quickly. Catherine shook her head, unable to speak. The sheet had fallen from her nerveless fingers into the dust. "Hey," Sam said gently, taking her shoulders. "You're safe. It's dead." "I couldn't move," she said, her voice high and thin. "I saw it, and I couldn't." "That's the smart thing," Sam assured her. "Moving might have spooked it." He studied her white face. "Come on, let's get you inside. The washing can wait." But Catherine shook her head fiercely. "No, I can't be afraid of every shadow, not here." Something fierce and proud flickered in Sam's chest. He helped her gather the dusty sheet, stood by while she re-washed it with hands that only trembled a little. When she was done, he showed her how to check for snakes, where they like to hide, how to walk loudly enough to warn them off. "The land's not trying to kill you," he said. "It's just indifferent. Respect it, learn its ways, and it'll let you be." That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Catherine said, "In Philadelphia, the worst danger was people. Here, at least the threats are honest. A rattlesnake doesn't pretend to be anything but what it is." Sam studied her profile in the golden light. "Catherine, what happened back east?" She was quiet so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, "Not tonight. Someday, but not tonight. Is that all right?" "It's all right," Sam said, and meant it. As August gave way to September, something had shifted between them. They still maintained careful boundaries, but within those borders, affection had begun to grow. Sam found himself looking forward to the evenings, to Catherine's quiet observations about the day, her unexpected humor, the way she hummed while she mended his shirts. Catherine, for her part, discovered the pleasure of making Sam smile, of seeing his eyes light up when she mastered some new ranch skill, of the solid comfort of his presence. The town remained cold. The women still whispered, but Catherine had stopped expecting acceptance. Instead, she found solace in the land, in the work, in the slow bloom of partnership with this quiet, steady man who'd taken a chance on a stranger. One evening, as they sat watching storm clouds build over the mountains, Sam cleared his throat. "You know, when I wrote that first letter, I never imagined, that is, I thought we'd be like business partners. Polite strangers sharing a house. And now?" Catherine asked softly. "Now?" Sam struggled for words. "Now I can't imagine this place without you in it." Catherine reached over and took his hand. The first time she'd initiated such contact. Her fingers were work rough now, but her touch was gentle. "This is my home now. Samuel, our home. Whatever comes, we'll face it together." As if in response to her words, thunder rolled across the plains, and the first fat drops of rain began to fall. They sat together on the porch, hands linked, watching the storm sweep over their land, unaware that 3 states away, a man was saddling a horse and turning his face toward Wyoming, carrying with him secrets that would test every fragile bond they'd built. But for now, in this moment, they had the rain, and the vast sky, and each other. For now, it was enough. The nightmares grew worse as autumn settled over the ranch. Sam would wake to find Catherine sitting bolt upright, her nightgown soaked with sweat, her eyes wide with terror at something only she could see. She never cried out anymore. She'd learned to muffle her fear, but the silence was somehow worse than screams would have been. "The same dream?" he'd ask, and she'd nod, accepting the glass of water he kept by the bedside for these occasions. "Tell me about the cattle," she'd whisper, her voice hoarse. "Tell me about tomorrow's work." So he would talk, his deep voice filling the darkness with mundane plans, moving the herd to the south pasture, mending the fence near the creek, preparing for the winter that crept closer each day. He'd talk until her breathing steadied and she lay back against the pillows, her hand finding his across the quilt. It was during one of these wakeful nights that Sam noticed the locket. Catherine had fallen back asleep, and in her restlessness, her nightgown had shifted, revealing a delicate gold chain around her neck. The locket itself was hidden beneath the fabric, but Sam could see its outline pressing against the white cotton. In all their months together, he'd never seen her without it. The next morning, as Catherine kneaded bread dough with fierce concentration, Sam worked up the courage to ask, "That locket you wear," he said carefully, "is it from your first marriage?" Catherine's hands stilled for just a moment before resuming their rhythm. "No," she said quietly. "It's older than that. My mother's." "I'm glad you have something of hers," Sam said, relieved it wasn't a memento of her first husband. Catherine's laugh was bitter. "It's all I have left. He sold everything else." Before Sam could respond, the sound of approaching horses made them both look toward the window. 3 riders were coming down the ranch road, their pace unhurried but purposeful. Sam recognized 2 of them, Sheriff Ben Hawley and his deputy, Tom Morrison. The third was a stranger. "Stay inside," Sam said quietly, reaching for the rifle by the door. "Samuel, please, Catherine, just until I know what they want." She nodded, but Sam saw her move to the window where she could watch without being seen. The men reined up in front of the house. Sheriff Hawley, a fair man who'd kept the peace in Redemption Creek for near a decade, touched the brim of his hat. "Morning, Sam, Ben, Tom." Sam nodded to each, then looked at the stranger, a thin man with pale eyes and clothes that marked him as an Easterner. "Don't believe I know your friend. This is Mr. Josiah Fletcher," the sheriff said, his tone carefully neutral. "He's a Pinkerton detective from Philadelphia." Sam's grip on the rifle tightened, though he kept it pointed at the ground. "What's a Pinkerton want with the double-bar M?" Fletcher spoke for himself, his voice carrying the clipped tones of the eastern cities. "I'm looking for someone, Mr. Mackenzie, a woman who may have come west about 6 months ago. Goes by the name Catherine Morrison." "That's my wife's name," Sam said evenly, "though it's Mackenzie now. I'd like to speak with her." Fletcher said, "Just a few questions." "About what?" Fletcher's smile was thin. "That's between her and me, Mr. Mackenzie. But I assure you, it's a matter of some importance." Sam was about to refuse when the door opened behind him. Catherine stepped out, her face pale but composed. She'd thrown a shawl over her work dress, and her hands were still dusted with flour. "I'm Catherine Mackenzie," she said. "How can I help you, Mr. Fletcher?" The detective's eyes sharpened as he studied her. "Mrs. Morrison, excuse me, Mrs. Mackenzie. I wonder if you might confirm some details for me." "Your maiden name was Catherine Ellis?" "Yes." "You were married to one Theodore Morrison of Philadelphia?" Catherine's chin lifted slightly. "I was." "And Mr. Morrison died on the evening of March 15th of this year?" "Yes." The word was barely a whisper. Fletcher reached into his coat and withdrew a photograph. "Do you recognize this item?" Even from where Sam stood, he could see Catherine sway slightly. The photograph showed an ornate pocket watch, its gold case elaborately engraved. "It belonged to my husband," Catherine said. "Indeed. Worth quite a sum. According to the family, the Morrison family is quite eager to recover it, along with certain other items that went missing after Theodore's death." Fletcher's tone was conversational, but his eyes never left Catherine's face. "They've hired the Pinkerton agency to locate both the items and the person who took them. I took nothing that wasn't mine by right," Catherine said, her voice stronger now. "That's not how the Morrison family sees it." Fletcher replied, "They claim you stole several valuable pieces before disappearing. They're prepared to press charges." Sam stepped forward, placing himself partially between Catherine and the detective. "My wife is no thief. That remains to be determined," Fletcher said coolly. "I'll need to search your property, Mrs. Mackenzie, and you'll need to come with me to answer some questions." "Now, hold on," Sheriff Hawley interjected. "Mr. Fletcher, you've got no authority here. This is my jurisdiction." "I have a warrant," Fletcher began, reaching into his coat again. "From Pennsylvania," the sheriff said, "which doesn't mean much in Wyoming territory. You want to search property or question folks here, you go through proper channels." Fletcher's jaw tightened. "Sheriff, this woman is wanted for—" "Alleged to have done something," Hawley corrected. "And last I checked, we don't arrest folks on allegations. You got evidence. You present it to Judge Carter. He'll decide if there's cause for action." For a long moment, the five of them stood frozen in a tense tableau. Then Fletcher nodded stiffly. "Very well. I'll be in town for several days. Mrs. Mackenzie, I trust you won't be traveling anywhere." "This is my home," Catherine said simply. "I have no intention of leaving." After the men rode off, Catherine sank onto the porch steps, her composure finally cracking. Sam sat beside her, close but not touching, waiting. "The watch," she said finally. "And some jewelry. His mother's things. I took them when I left." She looked at Sam with haunted eyes. "They were gifts. He gave them to me, but his family never approved of the marriage. They said I was beneath them, a nobody who trapped their son. Why didn't you tell them where the items were?" Catherine's laugh was broken. "Because I sold them, for the train ticket. For traveling money. I had nothing else." She pressed her hands to her face. "I'm sorry. Samuel, I've brought trouble to your door. I should have told you." "What else haven't you told me?" Sam asked gently. Catherine was quiet for so long that Sam thought she wouldn't answer. Then, in a voice so low he had to lean close to hear, she began to speak. "Theodore Morrison was handsome and charming and came from a good family. When he courted me, I thought I was the luckiest girl in Philadelphia. My parents were dead. I had no money, no prospects. He was my salvation." Her voice turned bitter. "I was too young and foolish to wonder why such a man would want someone like me." Sam waited, his heart heavy with dread at what was coming. "The drinking started after we married, and with the drinking came the anger. The first time he struck me, he cried afterward, swore it would never happen again." Catherine's hand went unconsciously to the locket at her throat. "But it did, again and again. His family knew, they had to know, but they said nothing. A wife's duty, his mother told me, was to keep her husband happy." "Catherine," Sam breathed, rage building in his chest. "The night he died, he came home drunk, worse than usual. He wanted the locket, my mother's locket. Said he needed money for gambling debts. When I refused." She touched her ribs gingerly, a remembered pain. "I thought he would kill me, but he was so drunk, he lost his balance, fell down the stairs, broke his neck." Sam's hands clenched into fists. "Good riddance. I didn't push him," Catherine said urgently. "I need you to know that. I wanted to. God help me, but I didn't." "I believe you," Sam said immediately. "But even if you had, no jury in the world would convict you." "You don't know the Morrison family," Catherine said bleakly. "They have money, influence. They'd have seen me hang rather than admit their son was a monster." She looked at Sam with tear-filled eyes. "So I ran. Took what I could and ran, and now I've brought their hatred here. To you." Sam pulled her against him, feeling her shake with suppressed sobs. "Let them come," he said fiercely. "This is Wyoming, not Philadelphia. We take care of our own here. The town already whispers about me." Catherine said against his shoulder, "When they find out about this, then they'll whisper louder." Sam said, "But you're my wife, and this is your home. That detective can sniff around all he wants, but he's got no proof of anything except that you survived a bad marriage." That night, as they lay in bed, Catherine curled against Sam's side for the first time, seeking comfort in his solid presence. Neither of them slept well, starting at every sound, wondering if Fletcher would return with the judge's warrant. But worse than Fletcher was the knowledge that Catherine's past had finally caught up with them, riding into town on a cloud of accusations and old hate. The fragile peace they'd built was cracking, and Sam feared what might crawl through those cracks before this was over. In town, at the Redemption Creek Hotel, Josiah Fletcher sat at his window, watching the street below. He'd sent a telegram to Philadelphia that afternoon. "Founder, resistance from locals. Send Theodore's cousin James. His testimony will be helpful." The reply had come swiftly. "James Morrison departed yesterday, arriving within week. Hold position." Fletcher smiled thinly. Let the local sheriff protect her for now. Once James arrived, James who'd been Theodore's drinking companion, James who'd witnessed the devoted marriage firsthand, things would change. The Morrison family would have their justice and their property, one way or another. In the saloon below, the gossip was already spreading like wildfire. A Pinkerton detective, asking about Sam Mackenzie's mail-order bride. Seems her past rode into town, just like we always knew it would. The stranger arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, riding a bay mare that had seen better days. Sam first spotted him from the north pasture where he was checking on a sick calf. Something about the rider's posture, arrogant despite his dusty clothes, made Sam's instincts prickle with warning. By the time Sam reached the house, the man was already there, talking to Catherine by the well. She stood frozen, the water bucket forgotten at her feet, her face drained of all color. The man was younger than Sam had expected, perhaps 30, with the soft look of someone who'd never done an honest day's work, but his eyes were cruel in a way that made Sam's hand inch toward his sidearm. "Catherine," Sam called, his voice deliberately calm. "We have a visitor." The stranger turned with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You must be the new husband, James Morrison." He extended a hand that Sam didn't take. "I'm Catherine's cousin. By marriage, of course." "Former marriage," Sam corrected coldly. "What's your business here?" James's smile widened. "Why, I've come to help clear up this unfortunate misunderstanding with the family. When Mr. Fletcher telegraphed that he'd found dear Catherine, I knew I had to come personally." "There's no misunderstanding," Catherine said, her voice barely steady. "I took nothing that wasn't freely given to me." Now, James said, his tone patronizing. "We both know that's not entirely true. Poor Theodore was hardly in his right mind those last months. The drinking, the laudanum for his headaches, he wasn't capable of making such gifts." "Get off my property," Sam said flatly. James's false affability slipped for a moment, revealing something uglier beneath. "I'm staying at the hotel in town, Mackenzie. I'll be around for a while. Catherine and I have so much to catch up on." He tipped his hat mockingly. "Good day." After he rode off, Catherine collapsed against Sam, shaking. "He knows?" she whispered. "James knows everything. He was there. He saw—" "Saw what?" Sam asked gently. Leading her inside, Catherine sank into a chair, her hands trembling as she accepted the glass of whiskey Sam poured. James was Theodore's shadow. They drank together, gambled together. He knew what Theodore did to me. Sometimes he watched. Her voice broke on the last word. Sam's vision went red. "He what?" "Never participated," Catherine said quickly, seeing his expression. "But he'd stand in the doorway, laughing, making comments, encouraging Theodore to discipline me properly." She took a shaky sip of whiskey. "The night Theodore died, James had been there earlier. They'd been drinking, arguing about money. James left just before it happened." "Did he see Theodore fall?" "No, but he saw the bruises later, at the funeral. Saw me try to cover them with powder." Catherine's laugh was bitter. "He offered to comfort me. Said Theodore had left me all alone, that I'd need a man's protection. When I refused him and disappeared the next day, he wants revenge," Sam finished. "For wounded pride. It's more than that. Theodore owed him money, a lot of money. James thinks I have it, hidden somewhere. The jewelry I sold wouldn't have covered a fraction of the debt." That evening, Sheriff Hawley paid them a visit. His weathered face was grim as he accepted Sam's offer of coffee. "That Morrison fellow's been making the rounds in town," the sheriff said, "telling anyone who'll listen about his poor cousin's widow who stole from the family and fled west. He's painting quite a picture." "What kind of picture?" Sam asked, though he could guess. "The kind that has decent folks clutching their pearls and locking their doors. According to him, your wife is a conniving thief who might have had a hand in her husband's death." Catherine made a small sound of distress. Sam reached for her hand, gripping it firmly. Ben, you know that's not true, Sam said. What I know and what folks believe are two different things, Hawley replied. Fletcher's filed formal papers with Judge Carter. There's going to be a hearing next week to determine if there's cause for arrest and extradition. A hearing? Catherine's voice was faint. It's not a trial, the sheriff assured her. Just the judge deciding if there's enough evidence to proceed. You'll have a chance to tell your side. After the sheriff left, Sam and Catherine sat in heavy silence. Finally, Sam spoke. We need help, a lawyer. With what money? Catherine asked hopelessly. Everything we have is tied up in the ranch. Then we'll mortgage the ranch. No. Catherine's refusal was immediate and fierce. I won't let you risk your home for me. You've worked too hard. Our home, Sam interrupted. And I'd risk a lot more than that to keep you safe. The next few days were torture. Every trip to town meant running a gauntlet of stares and whispers. Mrs. Hartwell crossed the street to avoid them. At the general store. Mr. Garrett served them with stiff politeness, but none of his usual friendliness. Only a few stood by them. Sheriff Hawley, Doc Martinson, who'd always been kind, and, surprisingly, Mrs. Murphy, who marched up to Catherine after church to declare loudly that anyone with eyes could see you're no thief, dear. James Morrison seemed to be everywhere, his presence a constant threat. He'd appear at the edge of their property, just watching. He'd be in town whenever they were, always with that mocking smile. Once, Catherine found him talking to their hired hand, Jake, who quit the next day without explanation. The night before the hearing, Catherine couldn't sleep. She stood at their bedroom window, clutching her mother's locket, staring out at the darkness. I should leave, she said when Sam joined her. Disappear again. It would be better for you. Sam turned her to face him. Catherine Mackenzie, if you run, I'll follow you. To the ends of the earth if I have to. Why? She whispered. Why would you do that for someone who's brought you nothing but trouble? Because I love you, Sam said simply, the words coming easier than he'd expected. Because you've brought me more joy in these few months than I had in all the years before. Because when I made those vows, I meant them. For better or worse. Remember? Catherine's eyes filled with tears. I love you too, she said. So much it terrifies me. I've already lost everything once. If I lost you too, you won't, Sam promised. We'll face this together. The morning of the hearing dawned gray and cold, matching their mood. Catherine dressed carefully in her best dress, the blue one from their wedding, and tried to still her trembling hands. Sam wore his Sunday suit and strapped on his gun belt, ignoring Catherine's worried look. Just in case, he said. The courthouse was packed. It seemed half the town had come to watch the spectacle. Fletcher sat at a table near the front, papers spread before him, looking satisfied. James Morrison lounged nearby, that cruel smile playing on his lips. Judge Carter, a stern man in his 60s who'd seen every kind of human failing, called the hearing to order. This is not a trial, he reminded the crowd. I'm here to determine if sufficient evidence exists to warrant Mrs. Mackenzie's arrest and extradition to Pennsylvania. Fletcher presented his case with cold efficiency. The missing jewelry, valued at over $2,000. The suspicious timing of Catherine's departure, the very morning after her husband's death. The fact that she'd used an assumed name to travel west. She fled like a thief in the night, Fletcher concluded. The actions of a guilty woman. Then James took the stand. His testimony was damning, painting Catherine as a calculating woman who'd married Theodore for his money and position. She was always asking for things, James said with false sadness. Poor Theodore tried so hard to please her, but nothing was ever enough. They fought constantly about money. Did you ever witness these fights? Fletcher asked. Many times. Catherine had quite a temper. The night Theodore died, I heard her threaten him. Catherine gasped. That's a lie. Judge Carter banged his gavel. You'll have your turn, Mrs. Mackenzie. When Catherine finally took the stand, her voice shook at first, then grew stronger as she told her story. The courtship that had seemed like a fairy tale, The marriage that became a nightmare. The bruises hidden under powder and careful dresses. The night Theodore died. He wanted my mother's locket, she said, her hand going unconsciously to her throat. The only thing I had left of her. When I refused, he struck me. He was drunk, stumbling. He fell down the stairs. I didn't push him, though God knows I wanted to. And the jewelry? Judge Carter asked. Wedding gifts. He'd said, tokens of affection. I took them because I had nothing else. No money of my own. Theodore controlled everything. I sold them for passage west, for a new start. She looked directly at James. I took nothing that wasn't mine to take. The judge called for a recess. In the hallway, James approached them, his mask finally dropping completely. You always were stubborn, he said to Catherine, low enough that only she and Sam could hear. Theodore should have broken you properly. But don't worry, there are ways to handle stubborn women, even here in the wilderness. Sam stepped forward, but Catherine caught his arm. That's what you want, she said to James. An excuse to cry assault, to paint us as violent. We won't give you that satisfaction. When court reconvened, Judge Carter looked troubled. This is a difficult case, he began. The evidence is largely circumstantial, and we have conflicting testimonies. However, Catherine reached for Sam's hand, gripping it tight. However, the judge continued, I cannot ignore the fact that valuable property is missing and misses. Mackenzie admits to taking it. While I sympathize with her circumstances, the law is clear. He looked at Catherine with something like regret. I find there is sufficient cause for arrest. Mrs. Mackenzie will be held pending extradition to Pennsylvania. The courtroom erupted. Sam shot to his feet, shouting objections. Catherine sat frozen, the color draining from her face. Through the chaos, she saw James Morrison's triumphant smile and Fletcher's satisfied nod. No, Sam said fiercely. Ben, you can't let them take her. Sheriff Hawley looked miserable. I have to follow the judge's order. Sam, I'm sorry. As the sheriff moved toward Catherine, she stood with dignity, though her legs trembled. It's all right, she said to Sam, though tears streamed down her face. Take care of the ranch. I'll be fine. Like hell you will, Sam growled. This isn't over. I'll get you out. Catherine, I swear it. As they led her away, Catherine looked back one last time. The last thing she saw was Sam's face, fierce with determination and love. Then the courthouse doors closed between them, and she was alone with her fate. The Redemption Creek jail consisted of 2 cells in the back of the sheriff's office, iron bars that had held everyone from drunk cowboys to horse thieves. Catherine sat on the narrow cot, her hands folded in her lap, trying to stop their trembling. Through the small barred window, she could hear the town going about its business, wheels creaking, horses snorting, the distant ring of the blacksmith's hammer. Sam hadn't left. She could see him through the doorway, arguing with Sheriff Hawley in low, urgent tones. He'd been there all night, refusing to go home despite the sheriff's suggestions. Ben, you know this isn't right, Sam was saying. That Morrison fellow is lying through his teeth. Maybe so, the sheriff replied wearily. But I can't prove it, and the judge made his decision. She'll get a fair trial in Philadelphia. Fair? Sam's laugh was bitter. With the Morrison family's money and influence, they'll railroad her straight to prison, if not worse. In her cell, Catherine closed her eyes. Prison. The word echoed in her mind like a death knell. She'd heard stories of women's prisons, dark, diseased places where inmates wasted away. But worse than that was the thought of never seeing Sam again, never watching another sunset from their porch, never feeling the Wyoming wind on her face. A commotion outside made her look up. Doc Martinson had arrived, insisting on checking on her. The elderly physician's kind face appeared at her cell door. How are you holding up, my dear? I've been better, Catherine managed with a weak smile. He studied her through the bars. You're pale. Are you eating? I'm not hungry. Doc turned to the sheriff. Ben, this woman needs proper food and fresh air. You can't keep her locked up like an animal. I'm following the law. Doc? The law! Doc snorted. Sometimes the law's an ass. That afternoon brought an unexpected visitor, Mrs. Adelaide Murphy swept into the jail like a force of nature, carrying a basket and trailing disapproval. Ben Hawley, you should be ashamed, she declared. I brought some decent food for Mrs. Mackenzie, and I'll thank you not to argue. She sat outside Catherine's cell, unpacking fresh bread, soup, and apple pie. Now then, she said briskly, we need to discuss what's really going on here. Mrs. Murphy, you shouldn't be here, Catherine said. People will talk. Let them talk. I've weathered worse gossip than this. The older woman's eyes were sharp. That James Morrison came to see me yesterday. Wanted to know all about you and Sam. I sent him off with a flea in his ear, but he made me curious. Curious about what? About why a man would travel all this way, spend all this money, just to persecute a widow over some jewelry. Doesn't add up. Mrs. Murphy leaned closer. What's he really after, dear? Catherine hesitated, then told her about Theodore's gambling debts, James's propositions, his belief that she had hidden money. Mrs. Murphy's expression darkened. So, he thinks to pressure you into telling him where this imaginary fortune is. Or perhaps he has other motives for wanting you back in Philadelphia, where you'd have no protection. That evening, as shadows lengthened across the jail floor, James Morrison appeared. Sheriff Hawley was out on rounds, leaving only young Deputy Morrison, no relation, on duty. The deputy, intimidated by the well-dressed Easterner, allowed him to approach Catherine's cell. Quite a come-down, James observed, looking around with satisfaction. From the Morrison mansion to a frontier jail, though I suppose you're used to cages by now. What do you want, James? He moved closer to the bars. You know what I want. Where's the money? Theodore had to have hidden something. You were his wife. You must know where. There is no money, Catherine said wearily. Theodore gambled it all away. You know that. Liar. James's cultured veneer slipped. $20,000 doesn't just disappear. He had accounts, investments, all gone. Check with the banks if you don't believe me. James gripped the bars, his knuckles white. You think you're clever, don't you? Running off, finding another fool to marry. But I know what you are. Theodore told me everything, how you seduced him, trapped him. Theodore was a drunk and a brute, Catherine said quietly, and you encouraged him every step of the way. James's face twisted. He was my cousin, my friend, and you killed him. He fell down the stairs, drunk, as you well know, since you helped him get that way. Deputy, James called suddenly. This woman is confessing to murder. The young deputy hurried over, confused. Ma'am, I said no such thing. Catherine said firmly, Mr. Morrison is upset about his cousin's death, but I've been cleared of any wrongdoing in that matter. James smiled coldly. We'll see what a Philadelphia jury thinks. Theodore's mother is quite eager to testify about your violent tempers, your threats. Threats I never made. Who will they believe? A grieving mother or a runaway thief? James straightened his coat. Think about it, Catherine. A word from me, and this could all go away. The charges dropped. The past forgotten. All you have to do is tell me where the money is. After he left, Catherine sank onto her cot, despair washing over her. She knew now what James really wanted, not just money, but power over her, the satisfaction of seeing her broken, begging, just like Theodore had wanted. Sam arrived minutes later, having passed James on the street. One look at Catherine's face told him something had happened. What did he say to you? Catherine repeated the conversation. Sam's face grew darker with every word. I'll kill him, he said flatly. No. Catherine reached through the bars to grasp his hand. That's what he wants, for you to do something rash. Then he can have us both arrested. I can't just sit by while he torments you. You're not sitting by. You're here. That's everything to me. They sat in silence for a while, hands clasped through the iron bars. Then Sam spoke. "I've been thinking. There has to be something we're missing. Some proof that James is lying." "Like what?" "You said he was there the night Theodore died. What if someone saw him leave? What if he wasn't as drunk as he pretended? Maybe he knows more about Theodore's death than he's saying." Catherine's eyes widened. "You think James—" "I think a man who'd travel this far for revenge might have other secrets. I'm going to wire Philadelphia, ask some questions. Sam, be careful. The Morrisons have connections everywhere. So do I. Maybe not fancy Eastern connections, but I know people who know people." He squeezed her hand. "We're going to fight this. Catherine, I promise." The next morning brought disturbing news. Fletcher had received authorization for extradition. Catherine would be transported to Philadelphia within the week. Sam's efforts to secure a lawyer had hit dead ends. No one wanted to go up against the Morrison family. But that afternoon, an unexpected ally emerged. Jake, their former hired hand, appeared at the jail, hat in hand, looking ashamed. "Mrs. Mackenzie," he said through the bars, "I owe you an apology. That Morrison fellow offered me money to spy on you, to report anything suspicious. I took it. I'm not proud, but I needed the cash." "What did you tell him?" Sam asked coldly. "Nothing useful, because there was nothing to tell. Mrs. Mackenzie's been nothing but a good, honest woman." Jake shifted uncomfortably. "But I heard him talking to that detective fellow. They were discussing what would happen when they got her back to Philadelphia. Morrison said something about alternative methods for getting information." Catherine paled. She knew what alternative methods meant in James Morrison's vocabulary. "Will you testify to this?" Sam asked urgently. Jake nodded. "I don't like being used, and I like even less what they're planning. It ain't right." That evening, as Catherine tried to force down some supper, a telegram arrived for Sam. He read it, his expression shifting from surprise to grim satisfaction. "What is it?" Sheriff Hawley asked. "Reply from a friend in Philadelphia. Seems James Morrison has some debts of his own. Big ones, to some very unpleasant people." Sam looked up. "The kind of people who break legs when payments are late." "That explains why he's so desperate for this imaginary money," the sheriff mused. "There's more," Sam continued. "My friend talked to servants from the Morrison house. One of them, a maid named Mary O'Brien, says she saw James leave the house that night looking stone-cold sober, and she heard him say something about teaching Theodore a lesson about welching on bets." Catherine gasped. "You think James pushed Theodore? Or at least knows more about his death than he's admitting?" Sam said, "Ben, this changes things, doesn't it?" The sheriff nodded slowly. "It might, if we can get this Mary O'Brien to make a formal statement. My friend's already working on it, offered to pay her passage west if she'll testify." For the first time in days, Catherine felt a spark of hope. Would she really come? "According to my friend, she has no love for the Morrison family. They dismissed her without references after Theodore's death." Sam smiled grimly. "Seems she's quite eager to tell her story to someone who'll listen." That night, Catherine lay on her narrow cot, staring at the ceiling. Outside, she could hear Sam still there, still standing guard. She pressed her hand to her mother's locket, drawing strength from its familiar weight. "Mother," she whispered to the darkness, "I've found a man who fights for me, who believes in me. Help me be strong enough to fight too." Tomorrow would bring new battles. Fletcher would push for immediate transport. James would increase his pressure. The town would continue to gossip and judge. But tonight, with Sam keeping vigil and unexpected allies emerging from shadows, Catherine dared to hope that justice might prevail over money and lies. The West had its own kind of law, rough and sometimes unfair, but occasionally it recognized truth when it saw it. The attack came 3 nights later, under a new moon that left the ranch in darkness. Sam had finally been convinced to go home for a few hours of rest, leaving Deputy Tom Morrison on watch at the jail. It was the opportunity James had been waiting for. The first sign of trouble was the thunder of hoofbeats approaching the double bar M. Sam jolted awake. reaching for his rifle before his feet hit the floor. Through the window, he saw them, 5 riders, faces covered with bandanas, torches held high. "Mackenzie," one called out, voice muffled but familiar. "You've got something that doesn't belong to you." Sam knew that voice. James Morrison might hide his face, but his eastern accent was unmistakable. "Get off my land," Sam shouted back, rifle trained on the lead rider. "Not until you convince your wife to be reasonable." James replied, "She has information we need. Perhaps losing this ranch will loosen her tongue." One of the riders threw his torch toward the barn. It landed in a pile of hay Sam had stacked that afternoon, and flames erupted immediately. "No!" Sam burst from the house, firing at the riders. They scattered, but more torches flew. The chicken coop caught fire. The tool shed. The world became orange flame and black smoke. Sam fought desperately, trying to save what he could. He managed to release the horses from the barn before the fire spread too far, watching them flee into the darkness. But he was 1 man against 5, and they had planned well. "This is just the beginning. Mackenzie," James called as they wheeled their horses around. "Every day she stays silent. You lose more. Think about that." They rode off, leaving Sam to battle the flames alone. By dawn, the barn was gone, along with the tool shed and chicken coop. The house had been spared, but black smoke stained its walls. Sam stood among the ashes, fists clenched, rage burning hotter than any fire. In town, Sheriff Hawley surveyed the damage grimly. "Can you identify them?" James Morrison was the leader, Sam said flatly. "I'd know his voice anywhere." "But you didn't see his face." "They wore bandanas." The sheriff sighed. "Without positive identification, it's your word against his. And he's been very visible in town all evening, playing cards at the saloon with plenty of witnesses. He must have slipped out." Sam insisted. "Maybe, but proving it is another matter." At the jail, Catherine had spent the night in agony, watching the orange glow on the horizon, knowing it came from their ranch. When Sam finally appeared, covered in soot and ash, she broke down. "This is my fault," she sobbed. "I've brought destruction to your life." "Our life," Sam corrected firmly. "And this isn't your fault. It's James Morrison's. He just made a big mistake. He's shown how desperate he is." But the attacks didn't stop. Over the next days, double-bar M cattle were found shot, fences were cut, allowing the remaining herd to scatter. Sam's 2 remaining hired hands were threatened in town and quit. The ranch was dying a slow death. Meanwhile, pressure mounted from another direction. Judge Carter, influenced by Fletcher's legal arguments and perhaps Morrison money, moved up the extradition date. Catherine would be transported to Philadelphia in 3 days. "We're running out of time," Sam said desperately to Sheriff Hawley. "Where's that witness from Philadelphia?" "On her way, supposedly. But even if she arrives—" "What?" The sheriff looked uncomfortable. "Sam, you need to prepare for the possibility that it won't matter. The Morrisons have deep pockets. Witnesses can be bought or intimidated." That night, Catherine made a decision. She called Sam to her cell, her face resolved. "I'm going to tell James what he wants to hear," she said. "What?" "I'll make up a story about hidden money. Send him on a wild goose chase. Maybe if he thinks he's won." "No." Sam gripped the bars. "Catherine, you can't trust him. Even if you give him what he wants, he won't let this go. You've defied him, embarrassed him. Men like James Morrison don't forgive that." "Then what do we do?" Catherine's voice broke. "I can't watch him destroy everything you've built. I won't." Before Sam could answer, commotion erupted outside. Deputy Morrison burst in, bleeding from a gash on his forehead. "They took him," he gasped. "That Eastern fellow and 4 others. They jumped me, took Sheriff Hawley." Sam's blood ran cold. "Where?" "Headed north, toward the old mine. They said—" The deputy swayed. "They said to tell Mrs. Mackenzie she has until dawn to remember where the money is, or the sheriff dies. It's a trap," Catherine said immediately. "Of course it's a trap," Sam agreed. "But we can't let Ben die." He turned to the deputy. "Get Doc Martinson for that head, then raise a posse." Sam, no, Catherine pleaded. This is what James wants. You riding out there in the dark, outnumbered. I know. Sam's smile was grim. But he's made another mistake. This isn't Philadelphia. Out here, we take care of our own. Within an hour, Sam had gathered allies. Jake had returned, bringing 2 friends. Doc Martinson insisted on coming, medical bag in hand. Even old Pete Hawkins showed up, ancient rifle in hand, declaring, Ben Hawley's a good man. I'll be damned if some eastern snake hurts him. But their strongest ally came from an unexpected source. As they prepared to ride out, a group of Apache scouts appeared, led by a man Sam recognized, Joseph Crow Feather, whose son Sam had helped during a harsh winter 2 years back. We saw the fires. Joseph said simply, heard about your trouble. These men attacked your land, threatened your woman. This is not the Apache way, but it is not our fight. However, he smiled slightly. If warriors happened to be hunting in the area and saw men in need. Sam gripped the man's shoulder gratefully. The Apache knew this land better than anyone. With their help, the old Silver Creek mine is treacherous, Joseph warned. Many places for ambush, but also many forgotten paths. They rode out as a war party, grim and determined. Sam's thoughts were on Catherine. Locked in that cell, helpless to do anything but wait. He'd failed to protect their ranch. He wouldn't fail to protect their friend. The mine appeared as dawn approached, its gaping mouth dark against the hillside. No guards were visible, which worried Sam more than opposition would have. Too quiet, Joseph murmured. They wait inside. Sheriff Hawley, Sam called out. Ben, can you hear me? A weak response came from within. Sam, that you, boy? We're coming for you. Ben, James Morrison's voice echoed from the mine. I wouldn't if I were you. Mackenzie, the good sheriff is sitting on enough dynamite to blow this whole hillside? One wrong move. What do you want, Morrison? You know what I want. Where's my money? There is no money, Sam shouted in frustration. Theodore gambled it away. Lies, James's voice cracked. $20,000. It has to be somewhere. She knows. Make her tell. Sam exchanged glances with his companions. The man sounded unhinged, driven past reason by desperation. Listen to me, Sam tried again. Whatever debts you have, this isn't the answer. Let the sheriff go, and we'll work something out. Laughter, wild and bitter. Work something out? Do you know what they'll do to me if I don't pay? Theodore promised. He swore he'd cover my markers. Then he died and left me nothing but debts. Understanding dawned. You were counting on Theodore's money to save yourself. When he died, when she killed him. You mean, did she? Sam asked carefully. Or did you push him, hoping to inherit? Silence. Then, he was drunk, stumbling. It would have been easy. James. A new voice from inside. Sheriff Hawley, weak but clear. Son, I heard what you just said. That sounded like a confession to me. Shut up. A sound of struggle. Then James again. It doesn't matter. None of it matters if I don't get that money. Joseph touched Sam's shoulder, pointed to a narrow path leading up the hillside. Apache scouts were already moving, silent as shadows. A back way into the mine. Sam needed to keep James talking, distracted. All right, Catherine knows where some money is hidden. Not 20,000, but enough to help. Let the sheriff go, and I'll bring you to it. You're lying. I'm not. Theodore did hide something. Catherine only told me recently. She was saving it for emergencies. Sam invented desperately. 5,000 in gold coins, hidden at the ranch. Silence. Sam could almost feel James wrestling with greed and suspicion. We're at the ranch. Let the sheriff go first. No! Tell me where! Or... His words cut off in a shout of surprise. The Apache had found their way in. Sounds of struggle echoed from the mine. Sam and his posse rushed forward. The scene inside was chaos. James Morrison wrestled with 2 Apache warriors while his hired guns, local toughs Sam recognized, had already surrendered. Sheriff Hawley sat tied to a chair, thankfully away from any dynamite. which appeared to be a bluff. James broke free for a moment, reaching for his gun. Sam didn't hesitate. His shot took Morrison in the shoulder, spinning him around. The man fell, clutching his wound. All fight gone. "It's over," Sam said quietly, as Doc Martinson tended to both the sheriff and Morrison. James began to talk, pain and defeat loosening his tongue. He rambled about debts, about Theodore's promises, about the night of the death. "He laughed at me," James moaned. "Said I was a fool to trust him. Said he'd spent everything, that there was nothing left. I didn't mean... I just pushed him. He was so drunk, he fell like a sack of grain." Sheriff Hawley, freed from his bonds, looked grim but satisfied. "Sam, you witnessed that confession?" "Every word." "Ben." By full daylight, they were back in town. James Morrison, bandaged and defeated, occupied the cell next to Catherine's. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Judge Carter, roused from bed and presented with James's confession and the testimony of multiple witnesses, had no choice but to dismiss all charges against Catherine. The door to her cell swung open, and she flew into Sam's arms. "It's over," he murmured into her hair. "You're free. The ranch," she said against his chest. "I saw the fires. We'll rebuild, together." Fletcher, his case in ruins and his employer exposed as a murderer, left on the noon stage without a word. The Morrison family would have to find someone else to pursue their vengeance, if they dared, after the scandal of James's confession. As Sam and Catherine rode home to survey the damage and begin rebuilding, she reached over to take his hand. "I'm sorry I brought such trouble to your life," she said. "Our life," Sam corrected, as he always did. "And you brought more than trouble. You brought love. That's worth any fight." Looking at their damaged but not destroyed ranch, at the mountains beyond and the vast sky above, Catherine felt the truth of his words. The past had indeed ridden into town, bringing fire and pain, but they had faced it together and won. Now, finally, they could build their future on honest ground. The morning after Catherine's release dawned clear and cold, autumn's first frost silvering the grass. She stood on the porch of their damaged home, surveying the destruction, where the barn had stood. Only blackened timbers remained. The acrid smell of smoke still hung in the air, a bitter reminder of how close they'd come to losing everything. Sam emerged from the house carrying 2 cups of coffee, the steam rising like prayers in the crisp air. "Jake's coming by later with some others," he said. "They want to help rebuild." Catherine accepted the coffee gratefully, wrapping her hands around the warm ceramic. "After everything, they still want to help." Word's gotten around about what really happened, about James Morrison's confession, about what you endured. Sam's jaw tightened. "Folks feel bad about how they treated you." As if to prove his point, a wagon appeared on the road, then another, and another. By mid-morning, half the town seemed to have gathered at the Double Bar M. Men carried lumber and tools. Women brought food and supplies. Even Mrs. Hartwell was there, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Mrs. Mackenzie," she said stiffly, approaching Catherine. "I owe you an apology. I was quick to judge, slow to show Christian charity. I hope you can forgive me." Catherine studied the woman who had caused her such pain with whispers and cold shoulders. She could hold on to the hurt, nurse the grudge, but what would that accomplish? "There's nothing to forgive," Catherine said quietly. "We all do what we think best with the information we have." Mrs. Hartwell's eyes filled with tears. "You're gracious, more than I deserve." She held out a wrapped bundle. "I brought some quilts, for when you rebuild." As the day progressed, Catherine moved among the workers, serving coffee, holding boards while men hammered, feeling a tentative belonging she hadn't experienced since arriving in Redemption Creek. These people had judged her. Yes, but they were also willing to admit their mistakes and make amends. "It's something, isn't it, Mrs.?" Murphy appeared at her elbow, beaming. "Nothing brings a community together like righting a wrong." "I'm grateful," Catherine said, "but part of me wonders if James hadn't confessed, if the truth hadn't come out so dramatically. Then some of us would still believe in you, Mrs. Murphy said firmly. And we'd have worked to convince the others. Truth has a way of surfacing, dear. Sometimes it just needs help. By evening, the framework of a new barn stood against the sky. It would take weeks to complete, but the beginning was there, as the helpers departed with promises to return. Sam and Catherine sat on their porch, exhausted but hopeful. "I've been thinking," Sam said, "about what comes next." Catherine tensed, despite everything. Part of her still feared abandonment, still waited for the moment when the burden of her past would prove too much. "The ranch took a heavy hit," Sam continued. "Lost cattle, structures, equipment. It'll be a lean winter. We'll manage." Catherine said quickly, "I can take in sewing if the women will hire me now. You could work some cattle drives. Or," Sam interrupted gently, "we could sell." Catherine stared at him. "Sell the ranch? But Sam, this is your life's work. Everything you've built is just land and wood." Sam finished. "Home isn't a place, Catherine. It's the people in it. If staying here means constantly fighting the past, always wondering when the next James Morrison will show up." "No!" Catherine's voice was fierce. "We are not running. Not from my past. Not from this place. The Double Bar M is our home. We fought for it, bled for it. I won't let fear drive us away." Sam smiled, relief evident in his eyes. "I was hoping you'd say that, but I needed you to know that you matter more than any piece of land." That night, they made love with a desperateness born of nearly losing each other. Afterward, as they lay entwined, Catherine finally removed her mother's locket, placing it on the bedside table. "I don't need to hide behind it anymore," she explained at Sam's questioning look. "For so long, it was my only protection, my reminder that I was someone before Theodore, that I could be someone after. But now," she traced patterns on Sam's chest, "now I have real protection, real love." The next weeks passed in a blur of rebuilding, true to their word. The townspeople continued to help. The new barn rose sturdy and strong. Fences were mended. Some of the scattered cattle were recovered. Doc Martinson even donated 2 milk cows, declaring that Catherine's butter was too good for the town to lose. But challenges remained. The ranch's finances were precarious. The loss of cattle and the cost of rebuilding, even with donated labor, had drained their reserves. Sam took to spending evenings poring over ledgers, his face grim. One night, Sheriff Hawley visited with news. "Thought you should know," he said, accepting coffee. "Got a letter from the authorities in Philadelphia. James Morrison was tried and convicted. He'll spend the next 20 years in prison." "Good," Sam said flatly. "There's more." The sheriff continued. "Seems the Morrison family want to distance themselves from the scandal. They're offering a settlement, acknowledgement that the jewelry was rightfully Catherine's, plus damages for defamation and false imprisonment." Catherine's hand stilled on her mending. A settlement. $5,000. The room fell silent. $5,000 would save the ranch, secure their future. But blood money, Catherine said quietly. Payment for their son's sins, their nephew's crimes. Taking it feels like saying it was all just a business transaction. "It's justice," Sam countered. "Partial, maybe, but still justice. They hurt you, nearly destroyed us. Why shouldn't they pay?" Sheriff Hawley cleared his throat. "You don't have to decide tonight. The offer stands. Think about it." After he left, Sam and Catherine sat in silence, each lost in thought. Finally, Catherine spoke. "If we take it, can we do some good with it, not just for us, but for others? What did you have in mind?" "A school," Catherine said, warming to the idea. "Redemption Creek needs a proper school. And maybe a fund for women like me. Women running from bad situations, needing a fresh start." Sam pulled her close. "I think that's a fine idea. Taking something born of pain and turning it into hope. The letter accepting the settlement was sent the next day. Winter arrived early that year, blanketing the ranch in snow by late October. But inside their rebuilt home, warmth prevailed. The barn stood full of hay, the root cellar stocked, the cattle sheltered. They'd survived. One evening, as snow fell softly outside, a knock came at the door. Sam opened it to find a young woman, barely out of her teens, shivering on their doorstep. Her dress was thin, her eyes haunted in a way Catherine recognized all too well. "Please," the girl stammered. I heard you help women in trouble. I have nowhere else to go." Catherine moved past Sam, drawing the girl inside. "You're safe now," she said firmly. "Whatever you're running from, you're safe here." As they settled the girl, Mary, she said her name was, with hot soup and warm blankets, Catherine caught Sam's eye. This was why they'd stayed, why they'd fought. Not just for themselves, but for this, the chance to offer others the sanctuary they'd built together. Later, as Mary slept in the spare room, Catherine found a moment of quiet. She stood at the window, watching the snow fall, transforming the harsh landscape into something soft and clean. "No regrets?" Sam asked, joining her. "None," Catherine said firmly. "The past rode into town and tried to destroy us, but we're still here, still standing, still together. And now we help Mary find her fresh start. We build that school. We live our lives without looking over our shoulders." She turned in his arms. "We've earned our happiness, Samuel Mackenzie, both of us." Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the scars of fire and violence, preparing the earth for spring's eventual return. Inside, two people who'd found each other across miles and misfortune held tight, knowing that whatever storms might come, they would weather them together. The morning brought clear skies and a letter from Philadelphia, Mary O'Brien, the maid who'd witnessed James Morrison leaving the house that fateful night, writing to thank them for their courage and to report that other servants were speaking up about the Morrison family's cruelties. Change, slow but certain, was coming. But that was the outside world's business. Here at the Double Bar M, there was stock to feed, a frightened girl to comfort, a future to build. Sam and Catherine Mackenzie had work to do, and they would do it together, on land sanctified by struggle and consecrated by love. The past had ridden into town, full of fury and old pain, but the present belonged to them, and the future stretched ahead, vast and promising as the Wyoming sky. Spring came slowly to Wyoming that year, the snow retreating reluctantly from the valleys, leaving behind mud and the promise of new growth. Catherine stood in the doorway of the completed schoolhouse, her hand resting unconsciously on her still flat belly, watching as families arrived for the dedication ceremony. "You ready for this?" Sam asked, joining her. He'd traded his work clothes for his Sunday best, though he kept tugging at the collar like it was trying to strangle him. "As ready as one can be," Catherine replied, smoothing her dress. The navy blue fabric was new, bought with part of the Morrison settlement, but the style was simple, practical. She was done with pretense, done with hiding. The schoolhouse itself was modest but sturdy, a single room with large windows to let in light, a pot-bellied stove for winter warmth, and rows of desks Sam had built himself. Above the doorway, a sign read, "Redemption Creek School" in neat letters. Mary, the young woman they'd taken in months ago, hurried over with an armload of flowers. "Mrs. Mackenzie, where should I put these?" "On the teacher's desk." "Dear," Catherine said warmly. Mary had flourished under their care, the haunted look fading from her eyes as she discovered her own strength. She'd be moving to Cheyenne soon, to work for a seamstress there, a fresh start made possible by the fund Catherine had established. As townsfolk gathered, Catherine noticed how different their faces looked now. Where once she'd seen suspicion and judgment, she now found acceptance, even warmth. Mrs. Hartwell had become an unexpected ally, organizing the church women to donate books for the school. Even old Pete Hawkins had contributed, grumbling all the while about young folks and their book learning. Sheriff Hawley called the crowd to order. "Folks, we're here to dedicate this schoolhouse. built with settlement money that came from pain but is being transformed into hope. I can't think of anyone better to say a few words than the woman who made it possible. Mrs. Catherine Mackenzie. Catherine's knees felt weak as she stepped forward, but Sam's steady presence behind her gave her strength. She looked out at the assembled faces, ranchers and townspeople, women who'd whispered about her and men who'd doubted her, children who would learn in this building. When I came to Redemption Creek, she began, her voice carrying clear in the spring air, I was running from something, from someone, from a past that threatened to destroy any chance at happiness. She paused, gathering courage. Many of you know the story now. The mail-order bride with secrets. The widow with a dark history. A few people shifted uncomfortably, remembering their own rush to judgment. But what I learned here, what this place taught me, is that we're all running from something. We all have pasts that shape us, mistakes that haunt us, pain that drives us. The question isn't whether we have shadows, it's what we do when they catch up to us. She found Sam's eyes, drawing strength from the love she saw there. This schoolhouse stands because shadows caught up to me, because a man's greed and cruelty followed me west, threatening everything I'd begun to build. But it also stands because this community, all of you, chose justice over gossip, truth over convenience. You helped us rebuild not just barns and fences, but faith in the goodness of people. Catherine's hand went to her stomach again, a gesture not lost on the women in the crowd who began to whisper, but kindly now, with excitement. Education is freedom, she continued. It's the power to read contracts before signing them, to write letters without depending on others, to imagine worlds beyond the one we're born into. Every child who learns in this building will carry that freedom forward. She stepped back, overwhelmed by emotion. Sam's arm came around her waist, steady and sure. Pastor Williams led a prayer of dedication, and then the schoolhouse was officially open. Children raced inside to claim desks, while adults admired the construction. Catherine found herself surrounded by women, all wanting to know about the baby, offering advice and support. When are you due, Mrs.? Murphy asked, beaming. Late summer, Catherine replied, still marveling at the miracle of it. After everything, the violence of her first marriage, the fears that she was too damaged to be a proper mother, new life grew within her. As the celebration continued, Sam pulled Catherine aside. There's something I want to show you, he said, leading her behind the schoolhouse. There, freshly painted, stood a smaller sign, the Catherine Mackenzie Fund for Women's Fresh Starts. Sam, she breathed. It should bear your name, he said firmly, so women know who to thank. So they know it's possible to survive, to thrive, to transform pain into purpose. That evening, as they returned to the ranch, they found an unexpected visitor waiting, Joseph Crow Feather, the Apache scout who'd helped rescue Sheriff Hawley. I bring news, he said without preamble. A woman travels this way. She asks in the Apache camps about the ranch that helps women. She is afraid, hunted. Her husband seeks her. Catherine exchanged glances with Sam. They'd helped 3 women since Mary, each finding shelter at the ranch before moving on to new lives. Word was spreading. Send her here, Catherine said immediately. We'll protect her. Joseph nodded. I thought you would say this. She will arrive tomorrow. As he rode away, Sam turned to Catherine. We can't save them all, he said gently. No, she agreed. But we can save some. That has to be enough. That night, as they lay together, Sam's hand resting protectively over the life growing inside her, Catherine thought about the journey that had brought them here, from a desperate letter answered by a lonely rancher, through fire and accusation, pain and triumph, to this, a life of purpose, a love tested and proven true. I used to dream about disappearing, she said into the darkness, about becoming nobody, invisible, safe. And now I want to be seen, known. I want our child to be proud of where they come from, of what we've built. She turned in his arms. Is that foolish? That's brave, Sam said firmly. That's the bravest thing I know. The next morning brought the new woman, Sarah, Her name was, barely 20, with fresh bruises and old fear in her eyes. Catherine settled her in Mary's old room, offering the same promises: safety, time to heal, help moving forward. As she worked through the day, tending the garden, helping Sarah, preparing lessons for the school's volunteer teacher, Catherine felt the rightness of it all. The ranch had become more than a home. It was a way station for broken souls, a place where women could shed their pasts like old skins and emerge renewed. The sun was setting when Sam found her on the porch, their daily ritual of watching darkness creep across the land. But now the view included the schoolhouse in the distance, smoke rising from chimneys in homes where women worked on quilts for the next woman who would need comfort, where men who'd learned the danger of quick judgment taught their sons to do better. "Any regrets?" Sam asked, echoing his question from months before. Catherine considered. The scars remained. Physical ones from Theodore, emotional ones from the trial of being judged and found wanting by those who didn't know her story. There would always be those who whispered about the mail-order bride with the checkered past. But there was also this, a husband who'd fought for her, a community that had learned to embrace rather than exile, a purpose born from pain, a new life quickening within her, proof that the future could be different from the past. "No regrets," she said, taking his hand. "The past rode into town and tried to destroy us. Instead, it taught us who we really are." "And who are we?" Catherine smiled, feeling the baby move for the first time, a flutter like hope taking wing. "We're survivors. We're builders. We're proof that love is stronger than fear, that truth outlasts lies, that even the harshest ground can bloom if you tend it with care." As if in agreement, the baby moved again, and Catherine placed Sam's hand where he could feel it. His eyes widened with wonder, and in that moment, she saw their whole future spread before them, children running through these rooms, women finding shelter under this roof, a community grown stronger through compassion. The mail-order bride had become a frontier wife, a broken woman had become a beacon of hope, and a lonely rancher had discovered that the greatest risk, opening his heart to a stranger, had brought the greatest reward. The stars emerged one by one in the vast Wyoming sky, each a point of light in the darkness, each a reminder that even the blackest night couldn't extinguish hope. And at the double bar M, where pain had been transformed into purpose and two strangers had become one flesh, the lights burned bright against the darkness, welcoming all who needed shelter from their own storms. The cowboy had married the mail-order bride, and her past had indeed ridden into town. But in the end, love had won, as it always does when given the chance to grow in honest ground. Thank you so much for listening to this tale from the Wild West. I hope Catherine and Sam's story touched your heart as much as it touched mine in the telling. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening to this story. Please share in the comments below so we can connect across the miles, just like Catherine's letters once connected two lonely hearts. Don't forget to subscribe to the From Wild West channel for more stories of love, courage, and redemption on the American frontier. What did you think of Catherine's journey? Share your thoughts below. I read every comment and would love to hear how this story resonated with you.